Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. Don't forget to make yourself a cup of tea or coffee if you want, because today we have very interesting stories, and one of them is a story about a woman who harassed OP and then tried to break the cello. Please subscribe if you haven't and I hope you'll enjoy it. This happened about 20 minutes ago. Past, me, take a wild guess, dad, my dad, EM, entitled mom, GK good kid, UD, Uber driver, P, police. So some backstory, my dad is in a wheelchair, and I'm his attendant most of the time, when he's out and about. When we go shopping we usually bus to where we're going, and take an Uberxl home. The XL fits his chair in the back and the groceries. So I'm sitting outside with my dad just browsing Reddit and looking to see when our driver will get here, as he's pulling an EM with GK in tow barge past us and get into the Uber. Pardon me, are you, my name? It doesn't matter who I am, you are driving me where I need to go, you are a taxi. Ma'am, I drive for Uber and my fare is, my name, if you aren't then please get out. I opened the door that M got in. Ma'am, can you please get out, I ordered this Uber for my dad and I. It's just a taxi, just order another one you brat. This Uber has my address set as the destination and has my card set to pay for it. I will not, I emphasize that, pay for you to go wherever you need to go, so get out before I make you. EM yelling. Are you threatening me, you runt? No, I'm saying that I can and will call the cops if need be. Get out of the freaking car, you dumb witch. Oh, what are you going to do, you cripple? Talk about my dad like that again and I will hurt you. That's not a threat, that's a promise. UD realized that something may happen and calls the police, but I hush him as I have a plan. After about 10 minutes of back and forth the police arrive, I step back and she claims I assaulted her. Driver takes her side. Ma'am, you need to get out, this is not your ride, if you touch me, I'll punch your freaking teeth in. P grabs EM and puts her in cuffs for threatening an officer. EM struggles and tries to resist. Eventually her and GK, who was quiet this entire time, are escorted away. I load my dad into the Uber and we go home. When we got home the driver was going to waive the charge because of what happened, but we told him no and gave him a good tip. Dad and I are still laughing about it as I write this. What the hell, lady, you can't just steal someone's Uber. And I definitely think your dad could kick her butt if you let him do that. This happened when I was 5 years old, and most of the details I know were told to me by my parents, so some things might be unclear. Cast, M, my mum, D, my dad, EM, entitled mom, G, my grandmother, my mum's mother, GS, M's grandson. I'm 17 now, but back when I was 5 our house was under renovation, so we were living in EM's house on rent. This house has 2 stores. The staircase to the second story was from the inside of the house and not outside, like my own house now. We only rented the first story as we didn't need the second one, and its use obviously came with extra charges. EM installed a door and locked it so we couldn't go there. EM was as disrespectful and shameless as a person could get. She would always show up and live in the second story, and since the only kitchen was downstairs, she would expect us to feed her, and M always did. She lived with her daughter, but EM was a severe diabetic and her own daughter had many restrictions on the food she eats, so she would show up here and eat whatever she wanted because we couldn't say no to feed her, and we also couldn't put any restrictions on her. All of this was fine, but 1 or twice she ate the food that was kept aside for M, who hadn't eaten yet because she was busy keeping everyone fed before eating for herself. EM did this after having eaten her own share without even asking for permission to eat that. This infuriated D a lot, but he couldn't say anything as she was the landlady, plus she was elderly. The worst thing she did was when her daughter's house was under pest control, so she, her daughter, her 2 children, a boy and a girl, around the same age as me, their maid all showed up to live here. Which technically isn't allowed even if we weren't renting the second story. But my kind as hell parents didn't say anything. During this time, M was 9 months pregnant with her due date nearing, and my G had come over from a different state to help take care of the baby. M has asthma and was feeling very sick and had a lot of problems breathing, all of this on top of being heavily pregnant. In the morning she was feeling really bad, so D later took her to the hospital and she was admitted. G was taking care of me on that day when M and D were in the hospital. EM was pissed and disappointed in M because she didn't cook for EM and her whole family, even though they brought their own maid along with them. EM decided to complain to my G, who is a really sweet and kind woman, and berate her that you didn't raise your daughter well, How could she just leave without cooking for my family? That was very irresponsible of her, so disrespectful etc. etc. G just took it and didn't say anything. Another time she brought over GS who she swore was the nicest, most well-mannered boy. The minute he entered the house he created problems. At some point he decided to take away my packet of chips and run away with it, and I just sat there and cried because I was a timid child at the time. Also, it's not like 5-year-olds are given chips every day. EM defended her GS and said that as they are guests and as he is older than me, I should share and be nice. M had enough of this and she yelled at GS and asked him to give back what's mine. Mind you, GS had had his own share and then stolen mine. Alongside the rent my parents also paid EM a separate amount of money which we typically pay to the owners, which is for any damages that might occur during tenancy. If there are none, the owners return when your tenancy ends. EM took the money and refused to give it back, saying we severely damaged her house. D used to be at work all the time. M was pregnant and didn't really have time or energy to wrestle with the house. I was a very well-behaved and quiet kid who kept to myself. The damage she claimed we did to her house was also very high and near the ceiling which we, especially me, couldn't have reached. EM was a Catholic just like my family and berated my parents and said that they weren't good Christians several times. This was after we had moved back to our own house which was close to the one we rented. She was also notorious for showing up at the house of other Catholics in the community at lunchtime and just barging in expecting to be fed and wasn't exactly very kind or nice, so nobody liked putting up with her. She couldn't climb very well and so she never really came to my house as we had a steep staircase and downstairs lived my dad's mom, my uncle, his wife and their 2 kids, and she didn't know them or like them. Okay, your mom barely ate so she can feed the 2-story people. And she was 9 months pregnant and went to the hospital, and EM was mad she left the house but didn't make her food. That's screwed up. EM, entitled mom. EK, entitled kid. S, entitled kid sister inquire. Me, not sure to be honest. A little backstory and context. I've done martial arts throughout my childhood and do competitive boxing in college. I'm pretty good and managed to get pretty far in a tournament last fall, so it's safe to say that I can defend myself and will do so regardless of who is threatening me. This story happened during high school when I was 16 and still really skinny. I didn't look like how strong I was, so a lot of people made the same mistake that EM did. Along with that, I played cello in high school, got first chair and still play it, so kind of a big deal. It was a concert night at the high school for band, orchestra, and choir. Our auditorium is pretty small, and we usually don't have room to store all of the instruments in the music room. We didn't have enough money for each class to have its own room, so we usually reserved the first 2 rows for instruments and instrument cases. It's very obvious that no one is allowed to sit there because of the bright red tape blocking off the rows restricted for students or cases. I placed my cello carefully in its soft case in the front row, center seat, so I could help set up a stage, placing chairs, stands, etc., and didn't really think anything would happen. Besides, who would want to sit by a bunch of cases for 2 hours? No one, right? Wrong. About 30 minutes before the performance began, the house opened, and some of the parents of other students who had arrived early found seats toward the front, sat down with their programs, talked to other parents, yada yada, but among them walked EM, a Karen of Karens, and her spawn of 9 or 10 years, EK. I'm putting rock stops, the circular rubber discs that keep the cello end pins from slipping, in front of the first few rows of cellist chairs when I glance over and see EM and EK looking at the front rows of seats with all of our stuff on them. Me, as politely as I can. Miss, you can't sit there, those are for instrument cases. EM ignored me or just didn't hear me, so this time I went to the edge of the stage where I'm at most 20 feet away from her. Miss, the red tape is. EM turns to me sharply and snaps. I know what it's for, God. EK cuts me a glare and is following his mom back and forth until the kid points to the chair in the middle. Mom, if we sit here, we can get the best view of S, right? Seriously, you can't. You're right, let's just move these out of the way. For a minute I'm just flabbergasted. Like, there they were, just piling people's cases with stuff in them on top of each other, and then I see EM's hand carelessly grab the top of my cello case by the headstock, the curly part with the tuner pegs. Me, this time fairly agitated. Don't touch that. That's my cello, stop it, can't you see the red tape? I let out a whimper of worry and hop off the stage, but by the time I get there, the cello had been thrown to the ground and landed with an even more worrying thud, crack, and dull crunch. The kid had turned around to look at the cello or something, but saw me there instead and jumped because he didn't see me get off the stage. Apparently that was enough to get EM to acknowledge that I was there and went in full mama care bear mode because I had scared her kid. Why did you hit my kid? Me, flinching a bit because she was at least twice my weight and was a few inches taller than me at the time. I didn't hit your kid, you just threw my cello and you can't sit. You don't get to tell me where I can and cannot sit, you're just a kid and a bully with no respect for adults. Now get out of my face and apologize to my son. Me, literally shrinking into myself. I didn't hit your kid, I didn't mean to scare him, I'm just trying to tell you that the red tape. Now, for whatever freaking reason, EK starts fake crying and clings to EM. He hit me, mom. He hit me and it hurts. EM is now gassed up because she has power over a teenager and her son is crying. Some of the other adults are standing up, but the bystander effect was strong with this crowd. How would you like it if someone went up to you and hit you over something as stupid as a seat? Your dumb violin probably wasn't in there. How dare you come up to my son and do that to him? I should smack you because your mother would if she was here. Her tirade just kinda faded out, to be honest. I was more worried about my cello than this kid's fake injury, but EM decided to go a step further. Next thing I know, she had grabbed me by the arm and started to pull me toward the side of the stage, her nails digging into my arm. What are you doing? Let go of me. Not before I find your teacher and have you kicked out for hitting my son. I started to pull back and the mom and I were quickly in a tug-o-war over my arm, with her screaming bloody murder as a few parents began to run up to break it up. She won the war and pulled me toward her. I don't know if she was going to slap me or grab me with her other hand, but as soon as I saw the other hand go up, I felt suddenly jittery and butterflies in my chest. Next thing I know, I had yanked free and saw my fist sitting right in the center of her fat face. She tumbled back and fell on her butt hard after stumbling back like a drunken pig on two legs, holding her face in pain as she started crying, screaming threats and obscenities at me as EK just started crying again. I didn't care about that though. I pushed past the very helpful parents and ran to check on my cello. I opened it up, my heart sinking into my stomach and hot tears swelling in my eyes as the side of the cello on the bottom was crushed and the bridge pushed out of place. It was fixable, but it would cost a lot and we could not afford it at the time. I simply wiped the tears away even though I kept crying for a solid half hour and bawled again later that night, closed the case again, walked out of the auditorium and called my dad. My parents had been to a billion of these, they were both working that night too, so I didn't force them to go to every concert. He left work and picked me up. He contemplated going in there to give her a piece of his mind, but I told him that I didn't want any more trouble tonight and just wanted to go home. He saw me crying, something of which I usually never do, and he just said that he'd tell mom and that they'd deal with it later. Needless to say, mom was pissed but not angry that I had decked EM in the nose. After a long talk with the principal about using violence to solve my problems, I got suspended. Kinda happy ending though. S told me after I came back from my suspension that her parents were going to try to press charges, but after my parents wanted to sue them for assaulting a minor and paying for a broken cello. She went away with that nonsense fairly quickly because there were witnesses that could back it up and the school security cameras would show a grown woman trying to drag and or strike a scrawny teenager half her size, trying to break free of her grasp. I hope your cello could be repaired afterwards. I think the suspension was nonsense. Even if you are not supposed to use violence, if you as a kid are being forced in any way, you should be able to defend yourself in any way necessary. This took place about 5 years ago and was the last straw in a string of stupid from this guy. Now the guy in my story isn't the caretaker, it was his older brother, the entitled jerk. His brother, a real stand-up guy, had gotten jerk and his family a suite in the building. The problem was that jerk, believing because he was the older brother, could help his brother do his job or even try to take over for him. He started trying to set up rules in the building, such the laundry room being locked after 9 p.m. every night. We had no restriction on when the room could be used or banning pork from the building. He even wanted all the tenants that had pets to move out. That was more than half the building, most people had dogs. The first week he was there, the entire building got evacuated out via fire alarm because he was burning dried herbs on a charcoal brazier and filled the halls with thick smoke. I had been asleep because of my night job and had to stand outside with my neighbors in my PJs and slippers in the rain to wait for the fire department to give the all clear. One of the biggest issues was how he treated the women in the building. Rude and disrespectful, or ignored them outright and only spoke to their husbands if there were repairs to be made. The single ladies, like me, he harassed and tried to have evicted, and saying things like women should live in their father's home or that of a male relative until their husbands can keep an eye on them. He took an instant dislike towards me because I work nights and normally don't get home till mid-morning. He actually accused me of being an inappropriate girl one morning when I had just gotten home and was dead tired. There were a few incidents where I would take my dog, a 14-year-old husky mix, for a walk, and his kids would run up to pet her. Sparky loved kids, but he would haul them away, muttering that he didn't want them near a dirty easy girl. Now, what finally happened was I had taken some vacation time, so I was awake during the day for a change. I was cooking something, and I had only thrown on a pair of shorts and an apron with my night shirt when my apartment door opened and Jerk stepped in with a collar and leash in his hands. "What the actual hell are you doing?" I demanded as I turned to him. The jerk didn't even knock before he unlocked my freaking door and walked in. He glared at me and tried to grab my dog. Apparently he didn't believe I hadn't paid the pet deposit and was trying to send my dog to the pound. I lost my crap. Sparky had been my dad's dog and he had died before I moved into the apartment. I had promised him that I would do everything I could to see that she was well treated should anything happen to him. I started grabbing random stuff off my counter and threw them at him. He got 2 eggs to the face and had to duck a coffee cup before I grabbed a metal baseball bat, a housewarming gift from my brother, and chased him out. Then I called the cops and the rental's main office to make reports. Also, when I moved in I had found that someone had installed a second deadbolt to the door to the apartment, but I didn't have the key for it. That I quickly corrected by calling my brother and having him pick a new lock set up for me, as I didn't want to leave Sparky alone in case he tried again. After the lock was changed, I went to speak with several of the neighbors that had been on the receiving end of his attitude. The rental company had me come down to their office for a meeting where he tried to spin it that I had a dangerous dog in my apartment and that I assaulted him. He wanted me evicted, arrested, and my dog put down. I laid out all the documentation I had of this man's behavior that I had been subjected to, as well as that from several others, including one woman who still had an open claim against him for stealing her cloths from the dryer and ruining them by putting hot and wet cloths from the dryer into garbage bags and leaving them there for a week, demanding $50 as a fee to get her stuff back. Since all her stuff came out of places like Lululemon, he had easily destroyed about $5,000 worth of cloths. I had also laid out, as it is written in the Provincial Tenancy Act, that to enter an apartment outside of an emergency, a minimum of 24 hours notice was to be given in writing. And given that he was not an employee of the company, he was trespassing under the Provincial Trespassing Act and had attempted theft of my property, my dog. I also dropped in that I had been speaking with a lawyer, and if they decided to evict me, I would take them to court and mostly likely win. It ended with him having to move, and a restraining order had been taken out against him by several of the women in the building. I feel bad for his kids and wife because they were super nice. His brother was gone not long after. He stopped doing his job and let the place get to hell before they packed and left in the middle of the night. Oh my god, your dog looks like a vicious hellhound, especially with a little ducky on its head. Good for you for standing up to the guy. What an idiot. Well guys, that's it for today. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing, and if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. The story is about a woman who interrupted OP's lunch, demanding he block the phone of her daughter's ex. Check this out if you haven't, and I'll see you in my next video.